Hi, my name is Shelly Murder, and welcome to Not Small Talk, podcast number 3, titled #Triggered. And I don't know if I could get any more douchey than that, but we'll see by the end of this episode. Obviously, we're talking about trigger warnings, and we're going to start off by defining them, and I'm going to use the loveliest place on the internet, Urban Dictionary, to help me out. Urban Dictionary defines trigger warnings as, quote, a phrase posted at the beginning of various posts, articles, or blogs. Its purpose is to warn weak-minded people who are easily offended that they might find what is being posted offensive in some way due to its content, causing them to overreact or otherwise start acting like a dipshit. Popular on Reddit, SRS, and other places that social justice warriors like to hang out. Trigger warnings are unnecessary 100% of the time due to the fact that people who are easily offended have no business randomly browsing the internet anyways. As a result of the phrase's irrelevance, most opinions that start out with this phrase tend to be simplistic and dull since they were made by people ridiculous enough to think that the internet is supposed to cater to people who can't take a joke. Trigger warning. If you think this phrase needs to be posted before politically incorrect opinions, you don't belong on the internets. Okay. That mouthful has 5,849 likes and 2,573 dislikes, and it is the most popular definition of trigger warnings on Urban Dictionary. The reason why I'm using Urban Dictionary's definition is because, A, the term trigger warning is relatively new in the mainstream media, so it isn't in our official dictionaries yet. It isn't in Merriam-Webster's dictionary or Oxford English. And reason number 2 is that Urban Dictionary is used quite a lot. I use it for terms like this that I know I'm not going to be able to find in an actual dictionary. And it's good for internet slang, and trigger warning did start as an internet slang term. It's been widely used on the internet since 2014. It has just now become popular in mainstream media, I don't know, over the past 9 months, maybe a year at most. Okay. So that definition is very obviously biased, okay? But it has almost 6,000 likes, which means that a lot of people agree with whoever wrote this. A lot of people feel that this is what trigger warnings are, and to be honest, whoever wrote that is wrong, okay? And that's my personal opinion. So we'll talk about my personal opinion later with trigger warnings. Right now, I'm only going to use professional opinions or opinions that are widely used, I guess. So I use the Urban Dictionary definition because 6,000 people, almost 6,000 people, agree with whoever wrote that. So let's get another definition. All right, so this college professor wrote an article about trigger warnings in the New York Times, and I'm going to read you her definition, which is trigger warnings are basically alerting individuals that they are about to engage with disturbing and traumatic material, and the purpose of them is to prevent PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder flashbacks. It's supposed to keep people who have PTSD from having a panic attack because the trigger warning is saying, like, hey, the content that is coming up in the video, in the lecture, in the paper you're reading, that this content has disturbing elements like rape, abuse, war, things like that. It's not trigger warnings used professionally in everyday life and, in some places on the internet. Their purpose is for giving you basically a viewer discretion warning that what you're about ready to see or you're about ready to read could be traumatic. And it's just giving you time to emotionally prepare yourself for engaging with that traumatic material, okay? It's not about political correctness or political incorrectness. So I don't know where Mr. Urban Dictionary definition got that, but okay. So basically, the reason why we're covering this today is because of how big hashtag triggered has become. It's become something that people say in everyday life. I hear it all the time at school. And also because trigger warnings are being used in a lot of businesses and on particularly college campuses at universities. And one university who has gotten a lot of attention is the University of Chicago, who actually, before the start of the fall semester of this year, denounced trigger warnings as a way for students to get out of work and experiencing controversial ideas. So basically, they wrote a letter that they sent to all of their incoming freshmen and said, none of our professors are going to use them. We aren't going to use trigger warnings because we think that you're just trying to, not be a professional student, that you just don't want to come to class that day, and we want you to experience controversial topics, and we think trigger warnings keep people from experiencing those topics. And once again, that's not what trigger warnings are, but a lot of people think that's what they are. So that's why we're going to discuss that today. So basically, after the University of Chicago sent out that letter, there was an uproar on the internet, as expected, because there always is. But basically, two sides came out of that. The trigger warnings are for whiny millennial side and hashtag triggered side. That's my own names for that. Sorry for offending you. But so let's actually look into this. Logically, as scientifically as possible, I'm going to use as much numbers and science and professional opinion as I can to back up my claims. And if you disagree with me, go ahead and tell me. I love healthy discussion, and maybe I'll feature you in the next video. Who knows? So, point one. Once again, trigger warnings are not used to get kids out of coming to class. Sorry, University of Chicago, but that's not the true use of trigger warnings, and I'm sorry if you think that's what they're actually used for. Personally, a lot of my professors at my university use trigger warnings in classes where traumatic topics can be discussed, like rape and abuse and war. I had trigger warnings a lot in my world politics class because we did talk about just sad and traumatic experiences that people actually go through around the world. And my professor would say, trigger warning, I'm going to show a video about rape. If you think that you might have a panic attack or an emotional response, prepare yourself for that. And if you really don't think that you can handle it, you can come talk to me and we'll figure out a way. But nobody did that. And that was a lecture of about 300 people, 320 to be exact. Out of 320 people, nobody got out of the lecture. And I've had trigger warnings in other classes too, but that class was the biggest lecture that I had, the biggest lecture size, and we used trigger warnings a lot, and nobody got out of doing work. And a lot of times she would, on the syllabus even, a lot of times professors on their syllabi write that we will be discussing traumatic experiences in our class, whatever class it is. If it's like my world politics class, we're going to be talking about human rights violations and abuse that people actually face in the world. So this is here to give you time to emotionally prepare yourself for class, basically. That's what it is. So they really aren't used for, as a millennial, us millennials don't use them to get out of work. We just don't. And to be honest, I don't think, even if people did use trigger warnings to get out of work, you could be a little bit better at preventing students from doing that instead of just getting rid of trigger warnings altogether. Like if I was a student, my professor said, trigger warning, we're going to be talking about rape today. If I was trying to get out of work, which I would never do, and no one really does, but if I was, and I went up to my professor and I was like, oh, I think I'm going to get triggered. I don't know if I can sit through the lecture. Like, the professor could say, oh, well, if you don't want to sit through the lecture, write a 4-page paper about, what we've been talking about, what's in your book about this information. You get what I'm saying? Professors could easily, very easily give other options if they felt like their students were trying to get out of coming to class or get out of doing work. But anyway, like I said earlier, trigger warnings are essentially a viewer discretion warning. They're not saying that you can not do the work. They're just saying, prepare yourself. It's going to be a heavy discussion today. It's going to be a heavy video we're watching. All right. Point number 2, here's basically my argument of why I think trigger warnings are important to have in the classroom and, businesses if you're going to be discussing traumatic material, but particularly in college, I think they're important. And here's why. According to RAINN, women in college of ages 18 to 24 are 3 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than the rest of women in the United States. So basically, if you're a female in college and you're aged 18 to 24, you're 3 times more likely to be raped than every other woman in the United States. That's scary. And the percentages go about 23.1% of female undergraduate students are raped while they're in college. That's almost a fourth. So if you're in college and you are in a lecture of 100 people and you look around, give or take, 23 of them could or will be sexually assaulted during their time there. And going further, according to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, 30% of female sexual assault victims will develop PTSD. So if you're, once again, in the lecture of 100 people, 23 of the women in that, if you're in a lecture where there's 100 girls in your class or 100 women in your class, 23 of them will have been sexually assaulted. And then about 6 of them will have PTSD. So at any given time, if you're in a classroom of, let's say, 100 men and women, so approximately 50 guys, 50 girls, 3 of the girls in that class are likely to have PTSD. So during your time in college, if you're in college, you're likely to meet somebody who has been sexually assaulted and has developed PTSD. With so many people on a college campus that go through sexual assault and also later develop PTSD, why is it so hard to give trigger warnings? Why is that so bad? To me, even though there hasn't been much scientific research saying if trigger warnings are actually effective at preventing flashbacks or panic attacks, to me, it is unethical to not say 2 words, trigger warning, in a lecture before you talk about something that is traumatizing, knowing that it only takes a breath out of your day and you could potentially make someone else's day a lot better. And same thing goes, you don't even have to breathe. Just put it in your syllabus. Just put it in your syllabus and say, hey, just so you know, if you're going to take this class, here's what you might face. Easy enough. I don't see why that's so hard or why it's so bad. And some people are, like I said, some people are like, oh, well, there isn't enough research on it. We don't know if it's actually effective. But we also don't know if it is ineffective. Like, trigger warnings could actually be working or could not be working. But either way, it doesn't take that much effort from us to do something nice like that, something so simple for somebody else, knowing that such a high population relatively on a college campus could have PTSD. And that's just sexual assault. And the reason why I use sexual assault is because it's the highest rate of crime on any given university campus. Out of experiencing any crime on a university campus, you're more likely to be raped than you are to be robbed or physically assaulted or attacked in some way. You're more likely to be raped. That's why I use that example. I'm not even talking about military, veterans, ROTC, not even talking about them right now. Just talking about sexual assault. Those numbers I was giving earlier, that's an estimate of how many people could have PTSD and how many people you could help by giving a trigger warning that doesn't take any time out of your day. Okay, so now that we've covered that, I'd like to transition to our public service announcement for public health, PTSD awareness. So I don't want to talk too much about myself because I want to keep this podcast series more about the information I'm giving. That's why I use a fake name and I don't have a picture of myself on the channel. But this topic really means a lot to me because I am somebody who has PTSD. I'm part of those statistics I gave earlier of women who have PTSD on a college campus. So I know how much this means to me. So all of my info for this public health awareness, PTSD awareness section came from the National Institute of Mental Health. So here's some information about PTSD. PTSD can arise from any traumatizing or extremely shocking event like a car accident, sexual assault, kidnappings, and of course war. Like I said, I haven't really talked about veterans much here. And part of the reason for that is because veterans are, when it comes to PTSD, you probably automatically think of a veteran coming back from war and having flashbacks from Iraq or being bombed. And yes, that's horrible. But no one talks about people who have PTSD from other incidents. No one talks about people who got in a car accident and get PTSD. It's a lot more common than just war. And I'm not saying that veterans who have PTSD are not as important as other people. I'm just saying that other people don't get as much coverage in the media. All right, so some symptoms of PTSD are flashbacks, nightmares, paranoia, avoiding anything that reminds the individual of the traumatic event, feeling easily startled, feeling tense, insomnia, angry outbursts, feeling guilty, trouble remembering details of the event, bad thoughts about oneself and the individual's life, decrease in interest in hobbies that the individual used to enjoy. So that's a lot. I'm sure most people know about nightmares and flashbacks, but avoidance is a big part of PTSD too. Me personally, my traumatic event occurred in the hometown where I used to live, and I don't like to go through there anymore because it brings up those feelings, and I don't want to have those feelings anymore. And that's what being triggered is. When, for someone who, for example, was raped or maybe was attacked in some way, like assaulted, not sexually assaulted, we'll go with that. Someone who was assaulted, watching a video in a classroom of somebody being assaulted or abused in some way brings up feelings of the traumatic event. All right, so 8% of the US population will develop PTSD sometime in their lives. And that's huge. 8%. And I know it's like, oh, 8%, Megan. But with the US population being, what is it now, 3 billion? Tell me if that's right. That might be wrong. But still, 8% is millions of people in the United States. Millions. And you're likely to meet some of those people throughout your life if you're not one of them already. All right, and going on, PTSD cannot be cured, unfortunately. Some people can work through it with treatment, which is talk therapy, psychotherapy, and medications like antidepressants and anti-anxiety pills. And some people will have PTSD and then a couple years later just don't have it anymore. It's not really that it was cured, it was just that I don't know what's a good term for what happens to them, but it's almost as if they grow out of it, which is not a normal thing. It's very uncommon with PTSD. Most people who have PTSD have it for life and just get better at dealing with it and knowing how it works as they get older and, as they get treatment. And for me, as someone who has PTSD, I have a few tips for you guys of how to be a better person to those with PTSD, just how to be a better human being when it comes to PTSD. All right, first, whenever possible, and some of these are very common sense, but people still do it anyway, but whenever possible, please don't walk right behind people, especially in a busy, in a street fair or something. If possible, give a little bit of space. A couple feet is, recommended, I would say. Don't walk right behind other people, because some people with PTSD are triggered by someone quickly approaching them from behind or feeling someone right behind them, breathing on their neck. And I know people don't do it on purpose to be malicious most of the time. They're not really thinking about it. But you could really be scaring people with PTSD and forcing them into a flashback. So try to be mindful of how close you're walking behind people. Tip number 2, don't touch people without asking first. I don't know why I have to say that, but again, it's something that people aren't very mindful of. For example, if you're first meeting somebody and talking to them, even just gesturing and touching their arm if there's somebody that had been abused or sexually assaulted, could send them into a flashback, could send them into a panic attack. And I know that it's not malicious, you're not trying to make them uncomfortable or scare them, but just don't touch people without asking if it's okay. Tip number 3, be respectful of your veterans, please, and refugees too, during the 4th of July. I know we've got a while until that comes up again, but really anytime there's fireworks, a lot of veterans, to them, fireworks, and actually, yes, fireworks sound a lot like bombs. They explode, they're loud, they sound like gunshots, and it can send veterans and refugees from war into flashbacks and just really scare them. So during the 4th of July, if you know you have a veteran that lives next door to you, maybe think about setting off those fireworks somewhere else if possible. And tip number 4, give fucking trigger warnings. It's not that hard, guys. It's not that hard. It doesn't get people out of doing work. It isn't just whiny millennials being whiny. They actually help. All right. So now that we've gone through some really heavy mental health topics, I really wanted to end on something funny. And what's funnier than crazy fucking celebrities? So I'm going to give some celebrity news highlights, and all of my information is from Huffington Post. So, highlight number 1, Tom Cruise is still a Scientologist, I guess. And He says it is a, quote, beautiful religion. Oh, Tom Cruise, you're like that crazy uncle that comes to every family gathering, every Easter, every Thanksgiving, and they're just trying to get you to go to their church or go to their club meeting, and it's like, okay, Uncle Dan, I've told you, 3 Thanksgivings now that I'm not interested, but okay, keep talking. That was bad. No, I'm not going to say much about Scientology here because we don't have the time. But I will say, for those of you who don't know what Scientology is a religion that is shrouded in mystery and government tax breaks. Yeah. Tom Cruise, I mean, he's a brilliant actor, and I really like his movies, which is why it sucks so much that he's a fucking psychopath, because it's just really hard just to watch his movies nowadays and not think about how he, like, I don't know, fucking beat Katie Holmes and thinks he's an alien and jumps over couches. All right. Highlight number 2. Katy Perry's birthday present to herself and the rest of the world was recording herself lip-syncing to Kanye West Famous at his concert in LA. I don't care about this shit. I really don't. I honestly was I was reading all these celebrity news things on Huffington Post website, and I was like, there's really nothing today, is there? But we're gonna do it anyway. I don't care about Katy Perry, I don't care about Kim, I don't care about Kanye or Taylor. And I really don't like them. I don't like any of them. I mean, it's good, like, publicity for them, I guess. This whole hashtag Kim exposed Taylor party thing, but I don't know. I think it's a waste of time. But not talking about that. I honestly did get a little happy when I read this article because I really don't like Taylor Swift. And out of anything that came out of that scandal months ago, whenever it was, I don't even remember anymore. But out of anything that came out of it, like, I'm just glad it was Taylor Swift that was getting all of this backlash because she's just so frustrating. Everything about her just pisses me off. And some of it I can't even tell you why, but what I can tell you why is because she's a fucking fake-ass feminist. She really is. She says she's a feminist, but everything that comes out of her mouth isn't feminist. Not even talking about white feminism here, but she is a white feminist. We'll discuss that in another video because it will take way too much time to cover. But just her songs alone, like Bad Blood and Shake It Off, all of it is anti-feminist rhetoric. It really is. I can't support her. I can't support the fact that I think she's using feminism as a name on her sleeve to get monetary gain. And it's not cool. So, you can put me in the hashtag Kim exposed Taylor party if you want, because I'm definitely not in the Taylor Swift party, that's for sure. All right, finally, my favorite celebrity news story of today. A guy sledgehammered Donald Trump's Hollywood star into a fine pile of dust. Brilliant. I mean, no, never mind. Vandalism is bad. Don't do it. But yes. I mean, I looked at it and that thing is just destroyed. So congrats to you, whatever your name is, whoever did that. Not gonna put your name out there. And like I said, vandalism is never okay, but neither is sexual assault, Mr. Trump. Neither is sexual assault. And going off that, don't forget to vote November 8th. Do what you gotta do. If you voted early, congrats. This election's a big deal. And if you wanna check out any of the articles that I've put up today, particularly the sledgehammer one, I'll put the link in the description. If you chuckled or nodded in agreement at least once during this podcast, give me a like and a subscribe. If you didn't, tell me in the comments how I can make my videos better for you because, like a 2000s hip-hop artist, I'm here to serve you. I'm Shelly Murder, and have a fantastic, wonderful day, and thanks for listening to this podcast.